To give an immediate disclaimer, this is not a Monogatari watch order video. If you're looking for that, I've already made one a couple years back. The formatting of the video itself is somewhat dated, but the order is still correct, so technically it still holds up fine. So with that out of the way, what's this video about? Basically, it's just a discussion on Monogatari's watch order for people who've already seen the series. I feel like Monogatari has a very weird perception when it comes to its watch order, as a lot of people just don't seem to agree on it. I feel like in recent years there has been a much better consensus that novel order is the correct order, which I agree with. But to this day, I still see people recommend anime release order or some other kind of hybrid order. I've even seen videos like this as recently as last year. So I feel like discussing this debate is still worthwhile. Most of the video will pertain to first, second, and final season, as these are already completed, and I have 4 main points for this side of the debate, but afterwards I will talk a bit about Off and Monster Season, as it is somewhat of a weird case. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with the main points. So the first point is very simple. It was the author's intent. Nisio Isin wrote the Monogatari series novels in the order that he wrote them. I feel like this should really be the end of the debate right here, as again, this is the way the story was intended to be presented, but this is still widely accessible information, so I feel like we have to go further. My second reason is for plot reasons. I'm not going to go super in-depth to each individual reason here, as you can make multiple videos on each one, but this centers around the 3 specific parts of Monogatari that people always debate about, and these are of course the things that are always varied depending on who you ask. Let's go ahead and start off with Kizu Monogatari. This is the easiest one I feel to explain. I think nowadays most people will tell you that it should be watched after Bakemonogatari, second, not during final season. Again, I've still seen people very recently suggest watching an anime release order. Do not do this. To go into it just a little bit, the ending of Nekomonogatari Kuro seems like a massive ass pull if you don't have the context of Kizu. It does kind of coincide with the end of Bake a little bit, but I feel like it's still not enough. I think the biggest issue is with Nisei Monogatari. Around the start of Nisei, we have the conversation with Araragi and Shinobu in the bath. This conversation makes little to no sense if you haven't seen Kizu. It's a massive tonal shift going from Bake to Nisei in this way, but if you've seen Kizu, it's honestly pretty understandable. This alone is probably enough of a reason to put Kizu after Bake, not in final season. But to give a couple other examples, the ending of Kabuki Monogatari loses a lot of its impact if you haven't seen Kizu. Seeing this sort of alternate Shinobu in this way, it doesn't have nearly as much weight if you don't know Kizu's context. And then also in Owari Monogatari with Shinobu Male, getting all this stuff before you've seen Kizu honestly seems pretty insane, and again, it does not have as much impact. A lot of the stuff is meant to be built up since Kizu, so it just seems really awkward to not have that context here. Moving on to Hana Monogatari, I made a video about this a while back, but Hana does a lot of setting up for the next couple arcs. The way Hana starts sort of presents this idea that Araragi and Senjugahara are dead, before immediately shifting to saying that they aren't, they've just graduated, immediately confirming the status that yes, they are alive. Also, the idea of Shinobu eating parts of the Rainy Devil is presented, meaning that she's also alive. As at the end of Otori Monogatari, we know that Nadeko wants to kill all 3 of them. If you watch this after second season, you have no context to what's going to happen, but if you've seen Hana first, right before Otori Monogatari like you're supposed to, then you already know they're alive. As the narrative of the latter half of second season should not be on whether or not they're going to die, that was never the point. It's entirely about the narrative. This isn't a battle shonen, so the prospect of them dying wasn't supposed to be the forefront of the story. There's also Kaiki. If you watch Hana after second season, then he seemingly dies at the end of Koi Monogatari, and then is just randomly back in Hana, which seems weird. But if you've seen Hana, you know he's alive, so the ending of Koi means that he's just lying here. And it was noted that you just can't trust him, which just plays further into that theme. I don't necessarily think the story is ruined if you watch Hana Monogatari after the rest of second season, unlike with Kizu, but it does work much better if you watch it first. Similarly, and something else I've already made a whole video on, is Koyomi Monogatari. A lot of people will tell you to watch Koyomi Monogatari between the Owari seasons. Do not do this. Watch it before Owari entirely. To give a bit of additional context here, in the novels, originally, they were supposed to go directly from Tsuki Monogatari to Owari Monogatari. However, Nisio Isin felt like he needed to build things up a bit more, so he opted to release Koyomi Monogatari to build up the world before getting to Owari. This should just outright confirm that you should probably watch Koyomi first, as again, it was meant to be set up for Owari entirely. It's also worth noting that the ending of Owari Season 1 and Koyomi both have a lot to do with the start of Owari Season 2. People tell you that because the ending of Koyomi leads directly into Owari Season 2, that you're supposed to watch it like that. I've always found this to be pretty insane, because Monogatari is not presented in chronological order at all, so ordering the series in a way to be chronological doesn't actually make any sense. Also, the payoff is significantly worse if you do this, because if you've seen Owari Season 1, you get the context of Kokoro Watari and Yume Watari, without really knowing why. And then of course at the end of Koyomi we see how they're used, which then leads directly into Owari Season 2. I feel like getting the context first doesn't really do a whole lot, because it's still just sort of a shocking event to see in Koyomi. Whereas if you watch Koyomi first, it's still very shocking, but then afterwards you see Owari, you get the context. It's sort of a light bulb moment when you know kind of what the swords were supposed to be for, not entirely, but then of course you get into Owari Season 2, and you're given the explanation. Again, while chronologically it is out of order, I feel like it works significantly better narratively. Yes, watching Koyomi between the two Owari seasons won't ruin your watch, but it is generally better to do it before the Owari seasons. So there's a pretty brief overview of the actual plot reasons to why these should be ordered in novel order, not in anime release order. But again, I still have 2 more points to why novel order is the order to watch the series in. My third reasoning is production delays. I think everyone's probably heard the story about Kizu Monogatari at this point. It was supposed to be the second installment in the series after Bakemonogatari. It was in production hell for years, finally released. But yes, it was supposed to be the second installment, so Kizu was always supposed to be after Bake, and now that it's out, and has been for years, I feel like it makes more sense to watch it right after Bake, and before Nisei, not during final season. A bit less well known, but still fairly well known, is Hana Monogatari's delay. Originally, Hana was supposed to be part of second season, presumably the third arc as it should have been, but due to Japan's strict TV scheduling, they had to cut this down. They only had 26 episodes exactly, so they cut out Hana Monogatari and just added in those 3 recap episodes instead. It does make some sense, as a lot of the other arcs are very interconnected. I guess they could have just cut out Koi Monogatari here, as it was the final arc, but because of how interconnected it is, I get why they didn't do that. And if you're going to cut out anything else, it probably has to be Hana Monogatari, which is what they did. But again, it was supposed to be released during second season. It was just an unfortunate circumstance that forced it out. As for Koyomi Monogatari, this one's a little bit weird. This is somewhat speculative on my part, but this was released very shortly after Owari, in fact the season after, as Owari was Fall 2015, Koyomi was Winter 2016. The interesting thing about Koyomi though is that its structure is much different than others. The episodes are only around half the length of the normal episodes, and they opted to make an entire special Koyomi Monogatari calendar app and release the episodes through that. It's entirely possible that the development of this app caused it to be released a bit later than it should have. And considering that up until this point they were following novel order, leads me to believe that this is probably supposed to be released before Owari, but just wasn't. Again, this is somewhat speculative, so if you want to remove this one from this point, then fair enough, but it still definitely pertains to Kizu and Hana. My fourth and final point I feel like should be the nail in the coffin, and this is something that I never really hear people bring up. I mean, I know I'm not the first one to bring this up, but it still seems to be a very, very uncommon point to hear, and I'm not sure why, as again, I feel like this should prove the order without any doubt, and that's the Blu-rays. The Blu-rays were kind of just released as the series would come out. However, eventually second season and final season got compilation box sets with the entire season in one Blu-ray set. Being the psychopath that I am, I do own the entire series on Blu-ray, and I do own the second season and final season box sets. And I also checked back to make sure, and yes, they are the exact same in the Japanese releases, which just further adds to the point here. But in these Blu-rays, they're in novel order. Shaft has a tendency to go back and do a lot of fixes to their anime before the Blu-ray releases, and I highly doubt that Aniplex just decided to change the order of their own accord. It's more than likely that Shaft wanted these fixed, as again, them being released in the way that they were was more so circumstance, not intention. As you can see here from my own Blu-rays, Hana Monogatari is in the second case, and is the first of the 2 arcs in there. It is the third arc of second season, which again is consistent with the novels. And Koyomi Monogatari is the second arc in the first case here, again coming before the Owari seasons. These are in novel order. The only outlier here is Kizu Monogatari, but that's only because there just isn't a first season box set. But the fact that Kizu is not in the final season box set would lead me to believe that it should probably be watched in novel order. I highly doubt the intention was to watch through a couple discs of the final season box set, shift back to the Kizu Monogatari Blu-rays, and then back to the box set. That makes 0 sense. So yes, the Blu-rays have it in the correct order, and that was intentional. I feel like this should be the end of any watch order debate that still remains. Again, it's not as common anymore, but I still see it. A lot of people watch a series, they go off to recommend it to their friends, and recommend anime order, and that's not how it should be watched. You're free to enjoy the series however you want. I don't care if you watch it in novel order, anime order, chronological order. You could even watch it in alphabetical order. I do not care if that's how you prefer to watch it on rewatches. It's just best to watch it in novel order on your first attempt, and to recommend other people to do so as well. And before someone tries to argue with Keys of Monogatari being later because it adds this extra element of mystery, that's just how skipping stuff works. If you have an origin story that comes partway through a story and you skip it, obviously you are going to have a lot of questions. You've intentionally created a mystery that wasn't supposed to be there. Again, if you prefer it like that, that's fine, but for new watchers, it should be seen in novel release order. So with all of that said, what about Off in Monster Season? The impression that I got is that they released the series in this way because it's the first installment of Monogatari in a very long time, and they wanted to make sure they had some big arcs to really sell it, and it is possible that off-season might harm them in that way. So I can see the intention here, and to be honest, while I would have preferred novel order, I don't think you have to skip Off in Monster Season until all of it's out, so you could reorder it into novel order. The order that's presented is actually fine. The reason for this is because off-season tends to be extremely disconnected. Like, it's not just a bunch of interweaving arcs that still tie into each other narratively, even if they aren't chronological. Off-season is very disconnected. I think most of the Waza and Oroka arcs don't really matter in terms of placement, like at all. Again, they don't really have many narrative impacts, so it's fine. Again, I'd prefer it otherwise, but I don't think it's worth forcing yourself to wait who knows how many years to actually get the proper novel order, when this order is still at least acceptable. The only big things I was really worried about was, first up, Acerola Bon Appetit being before Shinobu Monogatari, and it was. It was the arc that preceded it, so that's fine, it worked. And also Nade Monogatari should be before anything from Monster Season, and again, it is. Plus I think Tsukiki Undo being before that was probably a good decision. There's really only two other big questions left. The first being, can they keep Monster Season in order, regardless of if you have certain off-season arcs going between them? As long as Monster Season itself is presented in order, I don't have any problems with this. And also, all of the Musubi Monogatari arcs should be presented in order at the same time. Again, as long as this is the case, I don't have a problem with it. But if they start splitting these up, then I probably will. I think they're probably going to stick mostly to novel order for Monster Season. It's just that they're splitting up off-season throughout it, which again is fair, not ideal, but understandable, and it doesn't harm the story, so I think it is fine as is. We'll see if they eventually reorder it, but for now, it works okay enough. I think that's really all for the video though. Hopefully it made enough sense. I've made a few videos on the topic before, but I wanted to just make one big watch order video for people who've already seen the series to just talk about the entire debate, because I feel like it's a debate that just should not exist anymore, and while again it has gotten a lot better, I still see the wrong order presented often enough to where it is still a bit of a problem, I think. But that's all for this video, so thanks for watching, and bye-bye.